The moment Bianca Fuller wiped the grease off her hands and looked up, she knew this wasn't just another customer. The sleek black sports car that rolled into her family's auto shop was worth more than the entire building. It purred like a beast restrained, its engine humming with untamed power. But it wasn't the car that made her pause, it was the man stepping out of it. Tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly confident, he removed his sunglasses with a practiced ease, revealing piercing green eyes that scanned the garage with mild disinterest. His suit fit him too perfectly to be off the rack, and the watch on his wrist probably cost more than Bianca made in a year. This man screamed money. Bianca folded her arms, tilting her head. "You sure you're in the right place?" His lips quirked, slightly more amused than offended. "I was told Fuller's garage is the best in town. That true?" She narrowed her eyes. "Depends who's asking." "Xander Ford." He extended a hand and she hesitated before shaking it. His grip was firm, his skin warm. "And you are?" "Bianca." His gaze flickered to the name patch on her coveralls, a slow realization dawning. "You're the mechanic?" "Got a problem with that," she challenged. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Not at all. Just unexpected." Bianca wasn't sure what it was about him, maybe the way he carried himself, maybe the way his voice dripped with authority, but something about Xander Ford unsettled her. She wasn't the type to be intimidated, but there was something about him that made her pulse quicken. She wiped her hands on a rag and walked around the car, inspecting it with a practiced eye. "What's the issue?" Xander leaned against the car, watching her. "Engine's been sputtering at high speeds. Thought I'd have someone take a look before I take it back to the city." She crouched down, running her fingers along the tire before pushing herself up. "I'll need to check under the hood." He stepped back, giving her space. As she lifted the hood and started her inspection, she could feel his eyes on her, studying her. Most men like him, polished, powerful, wealthy, would have left the car and gone about their business. But Xander stayed, watching as she worked. "You don't seem like the type who works in a place like this," he mused. She shot him a look. "And you don't seem like the type who gets his hands dirty, so I guess we're even." He laughed, a low, rich sound that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Bianca focused on the engine, ignoring the way her heart reacted to his presence. She'd dealt with plenty of customers before, but none of them had ever made her this aware of herself. "You're good at this," Xander said after a moment. She arched a brow. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised. Impressed." She didn't know why his words affected her, but they did. Maybe because men like him weren't the kind to hand out compliments easily. After a few more minutes of checking, she wiped her hands again. "Looks like you've got a minor issue with the fuel injectors." "Nothing I can't fix, but it'll take a couple of hours." Xander checked his watch. "I've got time." She blinked. "You're staying." "Why not?" He leaned against the counter, looking far too comfortable in his expensive suit. "Unless you'd rather I leave?" Bianca hesitated. Most customers left their cars and returned later. But Xander Ford wasn't most customers. "Suit yourself," she muttered, grabbing her tools. As she worked, Xander stayed close, asking questions, making conversation. She found herself laughing more than she expected, enjoying the easy banter between them. He was arrogant, but not in an unbearable way. He was sharp, but not cruel. And despite his wealth, he didn't look down on her. She wasn't sure what to make of him. By the time she finished, the sun had started to set, casting a golden glow over the garage. She wiped her brow, stepping back. "All done." Xander pushed off the counter, walking over to inspect her work. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and grinned when it purred to life smoothly. "Impressive." Bianca smirked. "Told you." He shut off the car and stepped out, pulling out his wallet. She waved him off. "Nah, you can pay at the front." He hesitated, then pulled out a business card instead. "I'd like to take you to dinner." Bianca's breath caught. "Excuse me." "A thank you dinner," he clarified, though there was something else in his gaze, something that made her stomach flip. "To show my appreciation for your work." She stared at him, unsure. There was no way a man like Xander Ford was interested in her. She was just a mechanic. He was clearly someone important. Still, her fingers closed around the card before she could stop herself. "I'll think about it," she said. Xander smiled, stepping back toward his car. "I'll wait for your call, Bianca." And with that, he slipped into the driver's seat and drove off, leaving Bianca standing there, her heart hammering in her chest. She glanced at the card in her hand, her fingers tightening around it. What had she just gotten herself into? Bianca stared at the business card in her hands for longer than she wanted to admit. The bold, embossed letters spelling out Xander Ford carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. The kind of name that belonged to someone untouchable, someone whose world was built on power and luxury, so why had he gone out of his way to ask her to dinner? She shoved the card into her pocket before her thoughts could spiral further and got back to work. The next few days passed without incident. Cars came in, repairs were made, and Bianca did what she did best, kept her hands busy and her mind focused on the job. But every so often her fingers would brush against the edge of that business card and her stomach would twist in ways she refused to acknowledge. She wasn't the kind of woman who got swept up in fleeting flirtations, especially not with men like Xander Ford. He was just another customer, nothing more. Or so she told herself. But when a sleek black car pulled up to the shop, again different from the one before, but just as expensive, she knew her resolve was about to be tested. Xander stepped out, his presence just as commanding as the first time. His gaze swept over the garage before landing on her with an intensity that sent an unwelcome thrill down her spine. "You never called," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. Bianca wiped her hands on a rag and leaned against the workbench. "Didn't think you were serious?" His lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement flickering across his features. "I don't say things I don't mean." She folded her arms. "And you make a habit of taking mechanics out to dinner?" "Only the ones who impress me." She should have rolled her eyes, scoffed, brushed off the comment like she would with any other smooth-talking man. But there was something disarming about Xander, something that made it difficult to dismiss him entirely. He gestured toward the car behind him. "Brought this one in for a tune-up. Thought I'd see if you were up for that dinner while I'm here." Bianca hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea, that whatever Xander Ford wanted from her, it couldn't possibly lead to anything good. But another part of her, the part that had been waiting for something, anything to shake up her routine, was dangerously close to saying yes. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "Fine. One dinner." Xander's expression didn't change, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "I'll pick you up at 7. She blinked. "Wait, I didn't say." But he was already heading back to his car, his confidence leaving no room for argument. 7 o'clock. Bianca had no idea what she just agreed to. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Bianca found herself pacing in her small apartment, second-guessing everything. She wasn't the type to get nervous, but something about this whole situation felt like stepping into unknown territory. When a knock sounded at her door, she squared her shoulders and opened it, only to be greeted by the sight of Xander Ford standing there, looking impossibly refined in a dark, tailored suit. "You clean up well," he observed, his gaze flicking over her. Bianca glanced down at herself. Simple black jeans, a fitted top, and a leather jacket. "This is as fancy as it gets." Xander didn't seem disappointed. "It suits you." She wasn't sure why that made her pulse jump. The drive was smooth, the interior of the car sleek and luxurious, though Bianca felt slightly out of place in something so pristine. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, eyeing the city lights as they passed. Xander's hands rested easily on the wheel. "Somewhere I think you'll like." When they pulled up to an upscale restaurant, Bianca immediately felt the weight of eyes on her. The valet opened her door and she hesitated before stepping out. "Didn't think you were the kind of guy who did casual dinners," she muttered as they walked inside. Xander chuckled. "This is casual for me." She believed it. The restaurant was all dim lighting, gleaming chandeliers, and whispered conversations. The kind of place where people like Xander belonged and where she definitely didn't. Still, she refused to let herself feel small. As they were seated, Xander studied her with an unreadable expression. "You don't seem the type to be easily impressed." Bianca leaned back in her chair. "Depends on what's being offered." A slow smile tugged at his lips. "And what does impress you?" She shrugged. "Honesty. Hard work. People who don't think they're better than everyone else." Xander traced the rim of his glass. "You think I fall into that last category?" "Not sure yet." His eyes darkened slightly, but instead of being offended, he looked intrigued. "Interesting." The conversation shifted as the night went on, lighthearted at times, sharp and teasing at others. Bianca found herself laughing more than she expected, and despite her initial reservations, she had to admit that Xander was surprising. But there was something else beneath the surface, something guarded. At one point, she set her fork down and studied him. "Why are you really here, Xander?" He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean? You could be anywhere right now. With anyone. So why are you sitting here having dinner with a mechanic from a rundown garage?" A long pause. Then finally, "Maybe I like people who don't care who I am." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Bianca held his stare for a moment longer, then exhaled. Well, at least you're honest. Xander smirked. That impress you? She rolled her eyes, but there was no real annoyance behind it. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about him. Bianca had spent her whole life keeping things simple. Work hard, don't take nonsense from anyone, and never let herself get caught up in distractions, especially the kind that came wrapped in expensive suits and smooth confidence. And yet here she was, stepping out of Xander Ford's car after a dinner that had felt dangerously close to something real. The evening air was crisp as he walked her to her door. She could feel the weight of his presence beside her, the quiet intensity of his gaze when she turned to face him. You going to ask to come inside? She asked, arms crossed, her tone teasing but her heart pounding. Xander's lips curved, his expression unreadable in the dim glow of the porch light. Would you let me? She leaned against the doorframe, considering him. I don't let just anyone into my space. His head tilted slightly. Good. I wouldn't want to be just anyone. Something flickered in her chest, an unfamiliar warmth that she wasn't sure how to handle. Xander Ford was dangerous not in an obvious way, but in the way that made her question things she had never doubted before. She exhaled, pushing off the frame. Good night, Ford. He chuckled, stepping back. Good night, Bianca. As she shut the door, she leaned against it, eyes closed for a moment. What was she doing? The next morning, Bianca was back in the garage before sunrise, trying to shake off the lingering thoughts of the night before. Work had always been her grounding force, the one thing that made sense. But even as she lost herself in the familiar rhythm of repairing engines and diagnosing problems, she couldn't ignore that her world had shifted. And that shift became impossible to ignore when, just before noon, another luxury car pulled up outside. Xander stepped out, dressed more casually this time, no suit, no tie, but still looking like he belonged in a world far from hers. She wiped the grease off her hands and met him halfway. You got another car that needs fixing? Or are you just here to hover? Hovering, he admitted without shame. And maybe seeing if you'd let me take you out again. She narrowed her eyes. You're persistent. I don't waste time pretending I don't want something. Her stomach twisted at the way he said it, his voice low, certain. She wasn't used to this men like him. Men who didn't play games but also didn't make it easy to ignore them. She folded her arms. I don't have time for distractions. Who said I'd be a distraction? She scoffed. Oh, please. Xander leaned against the counter, watching her with quiet amusement. All right, how about this one afternoon? No pressure, no expectations. Just a drive. Bianca hesitated. It was tempting, too tempting. And that was exactly why she should say no. But before she could, he added, unless you're scared. She bristled. Of what? That you might enjoy it. Her jaw tightened, but there was no real irritation behind it, just the undeniable pull of curiosity. Grabbing her jacket, she locked up the garage and followed him to the car. One afternoon, she warned. Xander opened the passenger door for her before sliding into the driver's seat. Let's see where the road takes us. The drive was smooth, the city giving way to open roads and stretches of countryside Bianca hadn't seen in years. She wasn't sure when she started to relax, but somewhere between the hum of the engine and the way Xander navigated the turns with effortless precision, she let herself enjoy it. You ever think about leaving? He asked after a while, his gaze still fixed on the road. She glanced at him. Leaving what? That garage. This town. She frowned. What, and run off to some high rise in the city? Xander's grip on the wheel tightened for a fraction of a second. If you wanted. Bianca shook her head. That place isn't for me. You sure? She turned to face him fully. Why do you care? His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer right away. Then, finally, because I've lived in that world my whole life, and trust me, it's not as untouchable as it seems. She studied him, trying to piece together what he wasn't saying. There was something there, just beneath the surface, something heavier than the easy charm he usually wore. Is that why you're here? She asked, voice quiet. Because you don't want to be there? Xander's fingers tapped against the wheel. Maybe. It wasn't the answer she expected. Before she could press further, he pulled off onto a quiet overlook, the city skyline visible in the distance. The view was stunning, but Bianca barely noticed. She turned to him. What are you running from, Xander? He didn't flinch, but he didn't answer right away either. Finally, he exhaled, leaning back against the seat. Expectations, he admitted. People who only see what they want to see. A life that never really felt like mine. Something inside her tightened. She understood that more than she wanted to admit. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Then Xander turned to her, his expression unreadable. You think I'm wasting my time? Bianca held his gaze. I think you're figuring out what you really want. His jaw shifted. And what if I already know? Her breath caught, but before she could say anything, he reached for her hand, not forceful, just a simple touch. She didn't pull away. For the first time in a long time, Bianca wasn't sure what came next. But as she sat there, the city lights flickering in the distance and Xander Ford's warmth beside her, she had the unsettling feeling that maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to run from it. Xander's grip on Bianca's hand lingered, his thumb brushing lightly against her knuckles. The city stretched before them, glittering in the darkness, but Bianca felt like the real storm was between them, silent, building, inevitable. You're thinking too much, Xander murmured. Bianca exhaled, forcing her fingers to loosen from where they had instinctively clenched. I don't like feeling unsteady. His gaze didn't waver. I don't think you've ever been unsteady a day in your life. She wanted to argue, to tell him that he didn't know her well enough to say something like that. But the truth settled between them. He had seen something in her, something she usually kept carefully guarded. Xander turned slightly, his body angled toward her. Come back to the city with me. Bianca blinked. What? Just for a weekend, he clarified. No expectations. No pressure. I just want you to see my world the way I've seen yours. She scoffed, shaking her head. Rich people with their spontaneous trips. A hint of a grin pulled at the corner of his mouth. You make it sound ridiculous. It is ridiculous, she said, but there was no real bite behind her words. Xander leaned back against the seat. Then humor me. Bianca hesitated. She had spent so long knowing exactly who she was, where she belonged. She wasn't the type to be whisked away by a man, no matter how compelling he was. But Xander wasn't just a man. He was something else entirely, a force that made her rethink things she had never questioned before. She tapped her fingers against her thigh. One weekend, she finally said. Xander's expression didn't shift, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Bianca didn't sleep much that night. The idea of stepping into his world made her uneasy, and yet the thought of not going, of letting whatever this was slip away, felt worse. When morning came, she packed a small bag, telling herself it wasn't a big deal. But when Xander arrived, leaning against the side of a sleek, unfamiliar car, she knew there was no turning back. The drive to the city was smooth, the landscape shifting from quiet roads to towering buildings. Everything about Xander's world was polished, refined, effortless. But the moment they pulled up to an impossibly tall building with a private entrance, Bianca realized just how different their worlds really were. A doorman greeted Xander by name, opening the door for them as if this was all routine. Bianca followed him inside, trying not to let her nerves show. The elevator ride was silent, tension crackling between them. When the doors opened to reveal a sprawling penthouse, Bianca took a slow step forward, absorbing the sheer luxury of it all. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, and everything from the furniture to the lighting screamed wealth in a way she had never seen up close. She turned to Xander, arms crossed. This is where you live? He nodded. When I'm not working. Bianca let out a low breath. I don't belong here. Xander's expression softened. That's not true. She glanced around, the contrast between her world and his hitting her all at once. I fix cars for a living, Xander. You have people who probably park them for you. He stepped closer, his presence steadying. That's not what this is about. She met his gaze, searching for something, anything to make this make sense. Then what is it about? His jaw tightened slightly, as if debating what to say. Then, quietly, you make me feel like myself. Bianca's breath caught. Xander continued, his voice steady. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only see what I can offer them. You never asked for anything. You never tried to impress me. You just are. She swallowed hard, her pulse thudding in her ears. And what exactly are we doing here, Ford? His gaze darkened slightly, but not with hesitation, with certainty. Something I don't want to ruin. For the first time, Bianca felt an unfamiliar kind of fear, not the kind that made her want to run, but the kind that made her want to stay. Xander reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. Stay the weekend. See my world. And if you still think you don't belong, I won't stop you from walking away. Bianca studied him for a long moment, then exhaled. Fine. But if I see a single gold-plated anything, I'm out. Xander chuckled, squeezing her hand. Noted. The weekend passed in a blur of experiences Bianca had never imagined. Private dinners in places where people whispered Xander's name. Invitations to events where she could feel the weight of curious stares. But through it all, Xander stayed close, his presence grounding her. At one point, they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city a sea of lights below them. Bianca leaned against the railing. You ever get tired of this? Xander didn't hesitate. All the time. She turned to him. Then why stay? His gaze met hers, something raw beneath the surface. Because I didn't have a reason to leave before. Her heart clenched. Xander stepped closer, his voice quieter now. Until now. Bianca's breath hitched. There was no denying it, not anymore. Whatever this was between them, it wasn't fleeting. It wasn't something she could ignore. She reached for him, her fingers curling around the front of his shirt. You're impossible. Xander's lips curved, but his expression was serious. But you're not walking away. She sighed, shaking her head slightly. No, I'm not. And then he kissed her. It wasn't tentative or uncertain, it was the kind of kiss that felt like a promise, like something inevitable finally falling into place. When they finally pulled apart, Xander rested his forehead against hers. Come back with me. For good. Bianca's heart pounded. It was madness. It was reckless. And yet, for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to run. She exhaled, pressing a hand against his chest. Ask me again in the morning. Xander smiled. I will. And somehow Bianca knew that when he did, she wouldn't say no. Bianca woke up to the golden glow of morning spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Xander's penthouse. For a moment, she didn't move, letting the unfamiliar luxury of the space settle around her. The sheets were softer than anything she'd ever slept in, the air carried the faint scent of expensive cologne, and the city hummed far below. And then reality hit. She'd stayed. She sat up, running a hand through her hair. Part of her had expected to wake up with a clearer answer, but all she felt was the same quiet pull, the one telling her she wasn't quite ready to walk away. The sound of footsteps made her glance toward the doorway. Xander stood there, freshly showered, his sleeves rolled up as he leaned against the frame. He didn't say anything right away, just watched her. You're staring, Bianca said, arching a brow. Just appreciating my luck, Xander replied. She rolled her eyes but couldn't fight the warmth creeping into her chest. You're ridiculous. He stepped closer, the mattress dipping slightly as he sat beside her. You thought about my question? Bianca exhaled, pulling her knees up. I have. Xander waited, his patience something she was still getting used to. He wasn't pressuring her, wasn't trying to convince her, just letting her decide. She rested her chin on her knee. This is your world, not mine. That doesn't mean it can't be ours. Bianca turned her head to study him. I don't need fancy restaurants and high-rise apartments. Xander nodded. I know. I don't want to be some accessory in your life. His expression shifted, something sharp behind his gaze. That's not what this is. She searched his face, looking for any hint of hesitation. But there was none. I don't know if I can fit into this, Bianca admitted. But I also don't know if I want to walk away. Xander reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. Then don't. Bianca swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling between them. I'll make a deal with you, Xander said. No expectations, no pressure. Just time. We figure it out together. She studied him. You really think this can work? A small smile tugged at his lips, and for the first time she saw something unguarded in his expression. I think you're the only thing that's made sense in a long time. Bianca let out a slow breath. She had spent so much of her life avoiding risks, keeping her world small and manageable. But Xander Ford had never been small, and maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to keep playing it safe. She squeezed his hand. All right, let's see where this goes. Xander's grip tightened just slightly, as if anchoring them both to the moment. And with that, she knew there was no turning back. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Bianca found herself splitting time between the garage and the city, balancing the familiar with the unfamiliar. Xander made it look effortless, integrating himself into her world just as much as she found herself slipping into his. He showed up at the shop unannounced, rolling up his sleeves and pretending to be useful while she worked. Customers gawked, not used to seeing a man in a tailored shirt holding a wrench. Bianca had to fight back laughter more than once as Xander attempted to look like he belonged, but the truth was, he did. and in return he introduced her to pieces of his life. Private dinners, exclusive events, places where people murmured his name and eyed Bianca with curiosity. But Xander never let her feel out of place, his hand always finding hers, his reassurance unspoken but constant. One evening, after an event that involved far too many people pretending to be interested in things they didn't care about, Bianca finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. Why do you stay in this world if you don't love it? They were on the balcony of his penthouse, the city stretching endlessly below. Xander leaned against the railing, his expression unreadable. Because walking away isn't as simple as it sounds, he admitted. Bianca crossed her arms. You're a millionaire, Xander. If you wanted to leave, you could. His jaw tightened slightly. It's not just about money. It's about responsibility, expectations, people relying on me. She studied him, realizing just how much weight he carried on his shoulders. You don't have to do this alone, she said softly. Xander turned to her, something shifting in his gaze. I don't want to. And that was the thing, wasn't it? They weren't just two people caught in an unexpected romance. They were two people trying to find a place where they could just be. The moment Bianca truly knew she wasn't going anywhere came on a quiet Sunday morning. They were at the garage, Xander sitting on a tool chest, watching as Bianca worked on an engine. He had grease smudged on his forearm, his expensive watch forgotten on the nearby workbench. You're terrible at this, Bianca muttered, tightening a bolt. Xander grinned. I think I'm improving. She snorted. That's a stretch. He reached over, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. You love having me around. Bianca rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. You're tolerable. Xander chuckled, but then his expression grew more serious. I meant it when I said I wanted to figure this out with you. Bianca met his gaze, her fingers curling around the wrench in her hand. I know. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. It wasn't a grand declaration or an extravagant gesture that sealed it. It was the quiet moments, the way Xander looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered, the way he fit into her world without trying to change it. So when he asked her, weeks later, if she wanted to officially move into the city with him, Bianca didn't hesitate. Only if you promise to keep showing up at the garage, she teased. Xander smirked. Deal. And just like that, they weren't two separate worlds anymore. They were one. Together. Bianca never imagined she would find herself living in a penthouse high above the city, waking up to the sight of Xander beside her, his arm draped over her waist as if he feared she might disappear overnight. It had been months since she had agreed to move in with him, yet some mornings she still felt the ghost of old doubts creeping in. But then Xander would stir, his lips pressing against her shoulder, his voice husky from sleep as he murmured, "You're thinking too much again." And just like that, the doubts would vanish. Their lives had settled into a rhythm that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Bianca split her time between the garage and the city, while Xander balanced a world of high-stakes business with quiet evenings spent cooking dinner together. Well, Bianca cooked, and Xander attempted not to burn the kitchen down. The garage had become a place of refuge for both of them. Bianca still worked there nearly every day, and Xander found excuses to stop by, rolling up his sleeves and pretending to help even though everyone knew he was mostly there to see her. Her father had taken a liking to him, though he did his best to act indifferent, grumbling about men in expensive suits pretending they knew what a carburetor was. One evening, as Bianca finished up a repair job, Xander leaned against the doorway, watching her. You know, he said, his voice casual, I could buy you a shop of your own. Bianca put down her wrench, wiping her hands on a rag before turning to him. What makes you think I want that? He shrugged. You could run things the way you want. Expand. Hire more people. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly. You trying to fix something that isn't broken? Xander studied her for a moment before exhaling. I just want to give you the world, Bianca. Something in her chest tightened. He said things like that so easily, so confidently, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. And maybe to him it was. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. I don't need the world, Ford. I just need you. His gaze softened, and for a moment, the weight of everything, the expectations, the differences in their lives faded into something simple. I'll never stop wanting to make things better for you, he admitted. Bianca smiled. And I'll never stop reminding you that I'm perfectly happy exactly where I am. Xander pressed a kiss to her forehead, his fingers curling around her waist. Then I guess we're at an impasse. She laughed, shaking her head. Not really. Because at the end of the day, we both know where we belong. He pulled her closer, his voice quieter now. Yeah, we do. Months passed and their life together became something solid, something real. The whispers in Xander's world about the woman who didn't belong had faded, replaced by begrudging acceptance. Bianca didn't care either way. She had never lived her life for the approval of others and she wasn't about to start now. Then one evening Xander took her away for the weekend. He didn't tell her where they were going, only that she should pack light. Bianca wasn't the type to enjoy surprises, but she trusted him. When the car pulled up to a secluded villa by the coast, she blinked, stepping out and taking in the breathtaking cliffs and the endless stretch of ocean. All right, I'll admit it. This is nice. Xander grinned, leading her inside. The villa was warm and inviting, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that overlooked the water. That evening, they sat outside with glasses of wine, the sound of waves crashing below them. Bianca glanced at him. So, what's the occasion? Xander set his glass down, reaching into his pocket. Her heart stilled. He pulled out a small velvet box and held it between them. I know you don't need grand gestures, Bianca, but I do. And I need you. She swallowed, unable to look away as he opened the box, revealing a ring that was stunning in its simplicity, elegant, timeless, perfect. Xander held her gaze. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Bianca's breath hitched. She had never been the kind of woman who dreamed of weddings, but in that moment, none of it felt like an obligation. It felt like exactly where she was meant to be. She exhaled slowly, then smiled. You know, Ford, you never actually asked me a question. His lips twitched, amusement flickering in his eyes. Bianca Fuller, will you marry me? She pretended to consider it for a moment before finally saying, yeah, I think I will. Xander laughed, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. And just like that, it was decided. Their wedding was nothing extravagant, just close friends and family gathered in a sun-drenched garden by the coast. Bianca wore a dress that wasn't frilly or excessive, just something simple and elegant. Xander stood at the altar waiting for her, his eyes never leaving hers. When they exchanged vows, there was no pretense, no flowery declarations, just the truth. That they had found something neither of them had been looking for and that they weren't about to let it go. As they walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, Xander leaned in. You're stuck with me now. Bianca squeezed his fingers. Wouldn't have it any other way? Years later, Bianca stood outside the garage she now owned, hands on her hips as she watched Xander attempt to teach their daughter how to check an engine. The little girl, no older than 5, frowned in concentration. Like this? Xander nodded, wiping grease off her tiny fingers with a rag. Exactly. Bianca smirked, crossing her arms. You do realize she's 5, right? Xander looked up, grinning. Never too early to start learning. Their daughter beamed. I want to be like Mama when I grow up. Bianca's heart clenched, warmth spreading through her. She stepped forward, pressing a kiss to the top of her daughter's head. You'll be even better, sweetheart. As she met Xander's gaze over their daughter's head, she knew this was the life she had never dared to dream of. And it was perfect.